All right, let's talk about one of the most incredible comeback stories in movie history. We're going to unpack how a film that was basically dead on arrival in 1980 somehow came back to life to become this immortal, beloved classic.
I mean, it's a great question, right? How does that even happen? And the answer, you'll see, isn't just about people getting nostalgic years later. It's about a fundamental change that happened, not on the screen, but inside the minds of the people watching.
So let's just set the scene for a second. The year is 1980. This movie comes out and just thud. It completely bombs.
Yeah, critics were not kind at all. They called it things like superficial and way too sappy. It was a total commercial failure. But then, something really weird started to happen. Fast forward to 1990, and a full-on dedicated fan club pops up, building this incredibly passionate following that just completely ignored how badly it was received at first. So you have to ask, what changed?
Well, to really solve this mystery, we've got to go back to the source material. See, the movie is an adaptation, and with any adaptation, it's all about the choices the filmmakers make. But in this case, one specific choice changed the entire DNA of the story.
The movie was based on a novel from 1975 called Bid Time Return by the legendary Richard Matheson. And, as you're about to see, the original story was, well, it was a much, much darker affair.
The difference between the book and the movie we all know is just jarring. The book isn't really a straightforward romance at all. It's this dark, psychological fantasy. And the whole reason the main character does what he does is completely different. In the novel, our hero, Richard Collier, isn't just some playwright who's struck by love. He's 36 years old, and he's just been diagnosed with a fatal, inoperable brain tumor. Think about that. His journey to the past isn't some romantic quest. It's the final, desperate act of a dying man. This just hangs over the entire story with this sense of tragedy and doom. Okay, now let's switch over to the film, because the filmmakers took that incredibly dark premise and made a very deliberate choice to transform it into this pure, sweeping, cinematic romance. And a huge part of why that worked was the absolutely electric, totally authentic chemistry between the stars. You had Christopher Reeve, who was desperate to prove he was more than just Superman, and the amazing Jane Seymour. And get this, they didn't have to act. They genuinely, madly fell in love while they were making the movie. Jane Seymour herself basically confirmed it. She said what audiences were feeling was real. You can't fake that. What people were seeing on screen wasn't just a performance, it was the real deal. That is lightning in a bottle, and it became the beating heart of the entire film.
Okay, so we've got a real-life romance playing out on screen, but the movie's true secret, its transformation, that happened in the script. This is where a few key changes basically paved the way for this totally unique afterlife it ended up having.
This chart just lays it all out in stark detail. Look at this. The protagonist goes from a 36-year-old dying man to a young, healthy guy. The whole genre shifts from dark fantasy to romance. His motivation isn't a final act anymore, it's fated love. But most importantly, and this is the absolute key to everything, the story no longer ends because of a brain tumor. That one single change is everything.
So, according to the screenwriter, who is Richard Matheson, the author of the book, the studio just wanted a more traditional romantic story. You know, having their hero, who was fresh off playing Superman, be terminally ill, it just didn't work for them. So they took out the tumor. And yeah, they got their romance, but by doing that, they created this huge narrative vacuum. They left one massive question completely unanswered. Why did he travel back in time in the first place?
And that is where the audience stepped in. Without a medical reason for Richard's journey, a lot of viewers, especially in places like Brazil, where spiritist ideas are really common, they just supplied their own spiritual reason.
As the film critic Octavio Caruso explains it, this part of the audience didn't see a man having a fantasy. No, they saw a powerful metaphor for one of the core ideas of spiritualism.
And what is that idea? Reincarnation. It's the belief that our soul lives many different lives and often reconnects with the same souls over and over again. It's all about this journey to resolve things from the past, to learn and to evolve together across lifetimes.
So you see, by taking out the tumor, the filmmakers completely changed what the story was about. It was no longer about one man's final escape from death. It became a story about two souls bound by destiny, fated to find each other across time. In this new interpretation, Richard wasn't escaping death. He was answering the call of a past life.
And this reading gave the film a profound mythic depth that the creators themselves never, ever intended.
So, what's the big takeaway from this incredible journey from a total flop to this cultural phenomenon?
Well, the film went through this amazing three-step evolution. First, you have this dark psychological novel about a dying man's last wish. Then it gets adapted into a pure, heartfelt romance fueled by actual real love. And finally, it was interpreted by its audience as this universal, spiritual myth about fated souls.
And that's why this film lasts. It accidentally tapped into a really powerful belief system. It stopped being just a story, and for a lot of people, it became this beautiful illustration of a spiritual truth. That love doesn't just conquer all, it literally conquers time itself.
And then, in this final, just incredibly poignant twist, life ended up imitating art. Years later, after that tragic accident that left him paralyzed, Christopher Reeve himself said he had an out-of-body experience, one that was eerily similar to his character's journey at the end of the film. And he said that experience helped him find the will to live on. The entire story of this film just shows you the incredible power of interpretation, and it leaves us with this really fascinating question. When does the audience become the final author? When do we, the viewers, give a work of art a meaning and a life that its creators never even dreamed of?